That's so brilliant! This video is sponsored by Photrus. And it's a fairy tale I hear again and again and again. Focusing on the hyperfocal distance would lead to the best possible sharpness. No, that's wrong. The opposite is the case. The hyperfocal distance is even a quite poor focusing method, and it leads even to quite weak sharpness. And don't get me wrong here. There are use cases, of course, where we need the hyperfocal distance, but for getting the best possible sharpness, there exist definitely better methods. Hi my friends, very nice to see you. First of all, just quickly, what is the hyperfocal distance? And that's super simple. Just decide on the closest point in your image you want to get sharp, and when you double that distance, that is the hyperfocal distance. When you focus there, even with a wide open aperture, something like f2.8 for instance, you get the best possible sharpness you could ever get. That is at least what most photographers would suppose when they are focusing at the hyperfocal distance. Yeah, I mean, the hyperfocal distance is really handled as the holy grail of sharpness if you want. But that's completely wrong. It even leads to poor sharpness. And before I tell you why it leads to poor sharpness and what you should do instead, let's have a look how focusing works in general. Now, basically, it doesn't matter where you focus in your image, it doesn't matter which aperture you choose, it doesn't matter which focusing method you use. In every case, there is only one point in your image that is 100% in focus. Yeah, even if you're using the area focusing method on your camera. In that case, it is just the camera that picks out the point for you where to focus. The focus always sits just on one single point, also when you're using the hyperfocal distance. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, when you are focusing at any point in your image, what happens is that point is 100% in focus, right? Just that point and other points which are randomly exactly at the same distance to your camera, of course. And then there is a kind of focusing layer which is around 1/3 in front of your focus point and 2/3 behind your focus point. That's the focusing layer, also known as depth of field. And every point inside that focusing layer is acceptably sharp. Again, one point is 100% in focus and all other points inside that layer are just acceptably sharp. Now, the further we go behind our focusing point, even inside our focus layer, or the more we go in front of the focus point, the less sharp it gets. Again, it's just acceptably sharp inside the focus layer. Now, the trick is, because we usually want to get a pin-sharp photograph from front to back, right? The trick is to create a really thick focus layer so that everything in our image gets sharp enough, right? There are different ways to achieve that. I will not go into detail here as I made already a comprehensive video about that. I will link it in the end of this video. And one of these methods is focusing at the hyperfocal distance. But that's not a good idea, and this is why. There are 3 ways of how to affect the thickness of the focus layer, or the depth of field if you want. And that is focal length, aperture, and focus distance. The focal length is given by my composition, so I will not touch the focal length just to adjust my depth of field. The aperture, on the other hand, is definitely our friend here. The more I close it, the thicker our focus layer gets, or in other words, the higher the depth of field gets. So I definitely consider the aperture when it comes down to getting a higher depth of field. And also the focus distance is an important size here for me. The further the focus point is in the distance, the higher is our depth of field. And the closer the focus point is to our camera, the thinner gets our depth of field. And now guess what? The hyperfocal distance is not all too far in the distance, right? It is even quite close to our foreground. So how in the world should that lead to the best possible sharpness? That's not possible. The thing is, this 1/3, 2/3 thing is just a rule of thumb. In reality, it is a tiny bit more complicated, I have to say. Just quickly, it has to do with the aperture. every point on the aperture creates a kind of circle of sharpness, and the intersection of all the circles result in the depth of field, which can be calculated with a circular equation. Yeah, but as this is not a maths channel, I will not go in detail here. However, the thing is, focusing on the hyperfocal distance doesn't lead to the best possible sharpness. It just leads to the best possible spread of sharpness over the entire image. Or let's say it leads to the best possible constancy of sharpness over the whole frame. The sharpness itself is even quite poor compared to other methods. Yeah, we could imagine like we are using a big fringe area of the depth of field, which is not very sharp, but constant. And before I will tell you now what you should do instead, my friends, if you like this video, please give me a thumb up. You know, it helps me, it helps the algorithm, and it helps also other photographers out there to find this video better on YouTube. Thank you therefore. Okay, focusing on the hyperfocal distance doesn't result in the best possible sharpness, but there are anyway situations where it's good to use the hyperfocal distance. And I know exactly now what you might think, but Christian, why in the world should anyone do that when it doesn't lead to the best possible sharpness? That's what you think, right? You know, sometimes we need a higher depth of field, right? But we can't close our aperture more for any reason. That could be not enough light, or getting diffraction with a too closed aperture, whatever it is. When we can't close our aperture more to get a higher depth of field, we could do, and you know it, right, focus stacking. But unfortunately, that is not always possible. So think about moving elements in your image, floating water. Yeah, maybe you don't have your tripod with you. Yeah, I mean, usually we have one with us, of course, but yeah, let's say we are not primarily out for photography, just for location scouting or hiking, whatever. You don't have a tripod with you. So focus stacking is not possible, but focusing at the hyperfocal distance would work in that case. You will not get the best possible sharpness by that, so in the end of the day, you get the shot. And that's all what counts, right? But when you have your tripod with you and you want to get the best possible sharpness without focus stacking, it is definitely important to focus more in the distance. Where exactly depends on what you're photographing and how you're photographing it. And I made already a comprehensive video about that. I will link it here for you. My friends, I hope this was useful. If yes, share it with your friends. And thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.